so beautiful. Today, I am so excited to be joined by that girl. And
Who's that girl? Who's that girl? It's Jess.
Jess Fry is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania, a certified intuitive eating counselor, and a body image coach. And fun fact, she is also a certified ADHD professional. She helps empower her clients to recognize their worth at every size so that they can confidently approach life with unapologetic authenticity. Jess's content ended up on my Instagram feed, and I am so thankful because it is so freaking good. So, without further ado, welcome Jess to Your Body Is Not the Problem podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So, to begin, can you share with us a bit more about you, please, and more about your own personal body image journey?
Yeah, so let's see. Every time I give this story, I feel like it's a little bit different, but it was around 2018 where I was actually working with a client who was in high school, and she was sharing some body image struggles. And I, as a therapist with a master's degree and lots of training, had sadly never been exposed to any kind of training around body image or eating disorders, which one of my goals is to change that. So I immediately dove into how to help this person, and we were doing some assessments together to figure out what the heck was going on. And as we were doing the assessments, I very quickly recognized that I was scoring really high myself with the same answers. And I was like, oh my goodness, these are things that are so normalized in our society. And I hadn't realized, even as a professional, that this was not okay. So I quickly did more research and tried to figure out how to help this person. And in that, started learning how to help myself at the same time. And that's when I came upon intuitive eating. And then I learned so much about body image and body image healing that it kind of just took off from there. And now it is my full-time career and biggest passion.
I love that. It's so interesting just how many things we have normalized as a society that it's like self-deprecating humor shouldn't be normal. It's common, but it shouldn't be normal.
Agreed.
Is there anything specific from your journey that you were able to recognize of oh, this is so normal, but I don't think I should be feeling this way?
Yeah, so I remember some of the questions that came up in those assessments were things like, do you take multiple photos and kind of zoom in on your own body parts and critique the way that you look in a photo? Do you obsess over the way you look? Are you kind of preoccupied with food? Are you worried about what other people are thinking when you go out in public? Do you choose multiple options for your wardrobe and end up with 30 things on the floor before you actually feel decent enough to walk out? Or in some cases, and I can remember myself doing this, cancel the plans altogether because you can become so distraught by feeling uncomfortable in everything you put on. So things like that were really common among my friend group. And then even within the culture of my office, these are conversations that happen amongst women, primarily being a therapist. I rarely worked with men. So the conversations are surrounding body image and what we're eating for lunch and what we're not eating this month and all of the things. And so it was so common. And I just thought oh, we all do that. We all feel this way. So it must be quote unquote healthy.
Yeah. So many things are deemed healthy and normal. And it's we're here to help you realize it's not normal and you don't have to keep thinking those things.
Mm.
And so for today's episode, I would love to have a discussion around fat phobia. And so can you describe for myself and the listener what fat phobia means to you?
My definition personally is a fear of gaining weight, a fear of being fat, and at times can turn into a hatred of fatness. So that can look a lot like discriminating toward people for being fat, being feeling a certain way around people when they happen to be in larger bodies, and just an overall discomfort with larger bodies in general.
Right. And so when it comes to fat phobia, can someone then be like just part of that? Like they can fear the fat, or maybe they feel the hatred towards people in bigger bodies, or do they kind of have to encapsulate all of those?
Good question. So I think it's a spectrum. I think most things are spectrums where it depends on your upbringing. It depends on what you've been exposed to. If you think of a spectrum as like a long line, there are certain people who are going to be on this end of the spectrum, some in the middle, and some at the other end who might be more extreme depending on what they've been ingrained with or they've been conditioned to believe. So,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so I know for a lot of us body image creators, we get slammed with comments about promoting obesity. So, kind of going off of like what fat phobia means to you, what are you actually promoting when you're on Instagram and you're sharing all this information, being like, you can love your body at any size and things like that? What are you actually trying to get across?
yeah. Uh, that's hard to like put into one statement, but I think I am promoting self-acceptance and size inclusivity. Um, when we get those kinds of comments from trolls, it hurts my heart because one, even just the word that you used in that sentence can be so triggering to a lot of people in larger bodies. And I think it's used in such a demonizing way. Um, and so when we're asked those questions, I think the most common comment or DM that I get from people who my content ends up on their side of the algorithm and I don't think they're expecting it. The comments are things like, I'm all for body positivity, but, and then insert fat phobic line here. And it's usually like, but being that big can't be healthy or yada yada. And what's really sad is that the body positivity movement was started decades ago for fat people. And it was founded by people who were angry with the way fat people were being treated. And it has obviously grown and morphed over the years as society does. And with the addition of social media and buzzwords and hashtags and all of the things, I think we've kind of taken a different route and a different approach. And it has been used, that phrase body positivity has been used by different groups of people where the marginalized population it was created for in the first place are marginalized again. And so it's really sad when we get these kinds of comments and we're simply just existing and trying to promote self-love and acceptance. And then we're being dragged by these terrible, unnecessary words. So I really hate it.
Yeah, I was getting those comments on one of my most recent reels, but I think it comes back to almost like the assumption that so many of us were raised in believing that your body size determines your health.
Mhm.
And it's the assumption that you can figure out how healthy someone is just by looking at them. And it's like I feel like that's also what we're trying to be like, no, this
Right.
comment is so not what's the word? Is not credible
Right.
because you don't actually know me. You don't know what I'm doing to take care of my health.
And I think there's so much, so many layers to that concept in and of itself as well, of like, why is a stranger on the internet concerned about another person's health? Because it truly isn't about health, it's about appearance. And when we're so conditioned to believe that fat equals unhealthy, which is untrue, and thin equals healthy, which is also untrue, that people feel that they have this obligation or this right to make a comment about something that simply isn't their business. And it's just wild to me.
It is very wild. That's another thing that's been normalized is making those
Yes.
comments about other people's bodies. But I always like to say, because I've lived in a smaller body and I've lived in a bigger body, both of them for me were unhealthy. So it's like I was so certain that if I just lost all of the weight, I'd be healthy, I'd be happy, I'd feel beautiful. I lost all of it. And I was like, why am I still sick? Why am I still struggling? Why am I not happy? And so I feel like that's something that I'm always trying to get out. And so when I get those comments too, I'm just like, you don't understand. Let me help you, please. Let me help shift your mindset. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate your content and I love what you're doing.
Thank
And you have a really beautiful reel that showcases how fat phobia can be passed down as a belief through all generations. Can you share with us an example of how fat phobia can be inherited?
what I like to talk about with that reel in particular, because I'm happy that it reached so many people. But it also, of course, came with a lot of doubt and questions and some of those trolls. Um, that in no way, shape, or form do I blame past generations, because the reason why it's been ingrained generationally is that the generations before us, just like we, are conditioned to believe with these messages and this false idea that we need to be fixed and we need to be morphed and our bodies need to be smaller and we need to attain these really unhealthy and oftentimes impossible things, um, to come across as like superior. And that's what it started with. Was, it's very rooted in racism. It's very rooted in these terrible things that I hope in 2023 we're trying to get away from. And people don't realize that. They don't realize the history of where it came from. But our parents' generations, the generations before them, were all taught really, really strongly that it is healthy to be smaller. And so when your brain is taught something and told something over and over and over again, you're going to believe it as true. So I don't blame them for passing those messages on to their children and their children's children, because what they thought with the information they had was that they were being helpful, that they were raising healthier kids. What I know now and what we know more of is that that actually wasn't healthy messaging and it did a lot of damage. And so now we get to use that new information and make sure that the generations that come after us are provided with better messaging. So it's kind of like a game of telephone where one generation is taught this and it's just passed along and passed along and passed along in different forms. And I think the intentions behind it are good. It's just we're realizing now how harmful that they actually end up being.
That's what I was talking to my dad about this morning because it was, I think, back in 2016 when I was at my heaviest, having a family dinner with my grandparents. And I think I was like back in the kitchen after dinner was technically done. And I like took an extra like piece of potato kind of thing. And then my grandfather called me fat. And at that time, it hurt so much because of the meaning I was putting onto that word, because of what I was taught that word meant.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my God, I don't have his acceptance. I'm disappointing him. All of these things. And so I've done a lot of work to forgive him. And like, I know he would never say those things again. And like, I've been helping teach him otherwise. But I like to think of it as he had good intentions. For him, he was taught fat equaled unhealthy. He wants me to be healthy. He did it in a very unhealthy, misaligned way. But I can now see his intentions were good, but it's now making the changes that it's like, we now get to say, hey, that doesn't mean I was unhealthy just because of the size of my body. And I mean, teaching him and showing him that, hey, Grampy, when I was at my smallest, I was still unhealthy. So it's like, what's actually the solution? It's not actually technically weight loss, it's the actual health behaviors. But so that's why I was just I really resonated with that reel, so I love that you shared it. And I guess one other question is how can we handle being around fat phobic family?
Oof. I think that's another spectrum. It's really hard um, and different for each person, depending on where those relatives and family members fall on their own spectrum of fat phobia. Some, hopefully, like your grampy that you just mentioned, some are more open minded to hearing different ways of thinking, and where it might take some seed planting, a few seeds over and over again, and some gentle dialogue back and forth. Sometimes those family members, come to terms with it, and they're happy to hear another way of thinking. Unfortunately, there are a lot of family members who just don't have the capability of doing so. Um, we use the phrase like they're stuck in their ways, and I think I often try to put myself in the shoes of other people and recognize that, like, I am very stuck in my ways of this information. And it would take, I can't even put words to how much it would take for me to think differently. But I would be open to thinking differently about it. So when I get frustrated that maybe family members who have heard something for decades and decades of their lives and they're unwilling to hear and listen and digest new information, I would probably be the same way. And so I have to give those people grace and uh, forgiveness, that just because they're unwilling to shift and they're unwilling to do things differently doesn't mean that I have to be unwilling as well. And those are the people that it's really important to set boundaries with. Um, to say, if you're unwilling to meet me where I need to be met, then these are the kinds of conversations I just don't want to be around. And so I think boundary setting becomes really, really important with those kinds of family members.
I think that's such a beautiful way that you put that of like they're struggling to put themselves into your shoes. And a cool thing that you can do is try to put yourself into their shoes. Again, it's not saying that what they're saying and believing is right or correct, but it's just another way that you can, I mean, continue having a good relationship with them.
Yeah, and empathize, like they are humans too, and they aren't the ones who created this
Mhm.
unhealthy toxicity. They are just as much victims of it as we are. And I think, it makes me more and more grateful that I was born in the generation I was born in, to luckily hear it at a different level than maybe they were given. So yeah, I think you kind of have to uh tiptoe around wherever they fall on that spectrum, but if you can give them the grace and see things from their side as well, it makes it a little bit easier.
What are some things we can do to stop believing the beliefs that people in our lives and society have influenced us with?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what I tell my clients is um, to give yourself some grace and compassion, that there's a reason you believe these things. And I often challenge people to take like one day of your week or your month and view the world with this new set of lenses, and go about your day the way you normally would, but think about it from the perspective of how many things exist in our world to teach us to be fat phobic. How many products exist at Target that are, you know, based out of fear mongering of like, oh no, you might have bushy eyebrows, or you might have eyebrows that are too thin, or oh no, you might have hair on your legs and you have to get rid of that, or oh no, um, this part of your body might smell if you sweat, so you need this product to fix it, or oh no, like there are so many things that exist. And whether it's right in our faces, like a weight loss commercial, or super, super subtle, like products on the shelves, we are constantly taught to fear gaining weight and taught to hate ourselves. So when it's coming from family and it's coming from society and it's coming from social media, it's normal that it's hard. The second thing that I tell people is, once you've given yourself that grace, that it's not going to be a quick fix overnight, it's going to take time and patience, it's a practice, is really challenging and recognizing the fat phobia that you have yourself. We all have a form of bias because of what we've been exposed to. So if you can start catching yourself, if you are watching TikTok, you're scrolling and there's a video about, making fun of someone who happens to be in a larger body because they do something quote unquote silly or stupid or whatever. If you find yourself laughing at that, like, check in. You don't have to check in with yourself from a judgmental aspect. You can do that in a curious and non-judgmental way, and then just start processing it. Why did I think that was funny? Where in life have I learned to laugh at people because of their size? Would that have been as funny if it was someone in a smaller body? Really processing where those beliefs come from and then starting to reframe them for yourself. Like, where's the accuracy in that? And is that something I want to change?
I think we all have a challenge now for June. It's to go
Yep.
out and just see, because you're right. Like, if you walk into Target and everything you listed off, I was insecure about that at one point. The hair on my legs. I had really bushy eyebrows when I was a young teenager, and then I waxed them too much and then they were too thin. And so it's like, everywhere you look. I mean, if you watch The Bachelor, if you watch any kind of show, it's literally everywhere, even in the grocery store. So I think it is a really cool way to or a really cool challenge to go out and be like, oh man, like, I'm really being like subliminal messaged all day long.
All day long. It's hard for me to even listen to the radio anymore. You know how in between segments they'll do these like, oh, a new study is out that teaches us yada yada yada, and it's almost always about eating something differently, cutting out of food, excessive exercise, something about changing your body and how that leads to whatever in terms of health. And the funny part is, I mean, I'm in a place now where I can listen and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. But they're so contradicting. Like, one day on Monday, it's don't eat fruit. And then on Wednesday, the segment is add more fruit in. And it's no wonder we're so confused and conflicted. And yeah, so it is surrounding us quite literally everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, I was always like Googling those questions of like, should I eat in the morning? Should I not eat in the morning? Like, what am I supposed to do? So you're not crazy if you don't know what you're supposed to do. Like, I also feel like everyone always says, like, oh, like, everyone knows what they're supposed to do. And it's like, but do
Mhm.
they?
Good question.
Do
Yeah.
they though? I don't know about that because it's so freaking confusing out there. It's the wild, wild west.
It is the wild, wild west.
Yeah. But so what are some other ways that fat phobia may show up in someone's life who is in a smaller body versus someone in a bigger body?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question. A lot of people think when they hear about fat phobia or anti-fat bias that only people in larger bodies are affected, but in fact, everyone is affected. So when you think about like the fear mongering that I've talked about and how there's this messaging that being bigger is bad, or we're given these subliminal messages that being in a larger body means you're lazy or you've quote let yourself go or whatever. We even think about like Disney villains, they're mostly always in a larger body. And so just that small detail can teach young kids and then for their whole entire lives that larger people are mean or they're bullies or they're these terrible things. So everyone is affected by fat phobia. When you are in a smaller body, the fear around what if I gain 5 pounds? What if I go up a dress size? There is still fear for those people, which can keep them in restrictive behaviors and can cause a lot of stress around the fact that our bodies are meant to change we are constantly changing and evolving. If we didn't, we would all be the same size we were when we were born. And that would be pretty impossible to get around and function. So we need to keep changing. It wouldn't make sense if we didn't. So if someone is taught that being fat is bad or being larger is bad, then it can keep people in smaller bodies from doing these really restrictive behaviors. And that can just be really harmful and also be just as difficult than for people who happen to be born in larger bodies to begin with.
Yeah, I know for myself that I was afraid of gaining weight when I was in the process of gaining a lot of weight, but I almost feel like I feared it more when I had actually started losing the weight. That
Mm,
I was even more set on I have to weigh myself like 5 times a day and I have to be very cautious of what I'm eating and how I'm moving my body. And the few pounds that I would gain, I was horrified about. And then I got even more in my head of like, well, what does my body actually look like today? And like, okay, make sure I'm sucking in. And so it's like, I do understand that it is something that everyone struggles with and everyone is going to struggle with it in a different way, kind of like your spectrum that you were talking about. But it is interesting how I really do think I feared it more when I started losing weight.
that makes so much sense. And something else I wanted to add to that is in terms of like weight stigma that people experience with medical professionals, uh, affects again all people. And I won't even get it. It's a whole soapbox if I start talking about weight stigma against people in larger bodies, but people in smaller bodies too. I've heard horror stories of medical professionals walking into a room with their patient and seeing that they happen to be in a smaller body and quite literally not doing their typical routines. What's the word I want to use? Like not assessments. I'm a clinician, so I think of assessments like their regular tests. Like they don't do their physicals and they don't follow through the way that they should be treating each patient because they can look at a patient and say, yeah, you're in a smaller body, so you look great, you look healthy. And I've heard horror stories of these people in smaller bodies who are like, I had something going on internally that was missed because a doctor thought just by looking at me that I didn't need to be further assessed, that I was healthy. So it even affects us at a level of physical health, which is terrifying.
For sure. Yeah, it was 9 years ago today that I started struggling with my health. So I was 17 years old and I went to multiple doctors that all kind of just brushed me off. And I truly think it's because I was in a smaller body at that point. And I don't think I would have been taken seriously in a sense unless I was in a bigger body. But then I know from hearing from so many other people that if I was in a bigger body, they would have just said, oh, lose weight. And it's like, where are we getting to the root cause here, people?
Oh my gosh, such a good point. It's terrifying, isn't it?
Hmm.
I'm so sorry you experienced that. That's so scary.
Thank you. I did eventually find a doctor, thankfully, that like looked at all my symptoms and I was like, we need more of you, please. It was hard because I had such a negative opinion of doctors
Mm.
because I was like, what are they doing for me? They weren't helping. They were just brushing me off, calling me crazy, saying, oh, you're just a teenager. You're fine. And I was like, try living in this body for a day, please.
Oh, that's terrifying. I'm glad you found the right fit. And whenever I find those people in any form of the health field, I'm always like, I would just like to clone you
Yeah,
and spread you around the world because more people need this kind of care.
exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you've watched the show House.
No.
Oh, so I always consider that doctor to be a lot like House, but without the drug addiction. But
I'll
he
have
was
to
just
look
like,
up house.
yeah, he's just like really good at solving the mystery puzzles kind of thing. And that's always what he called it. Is like it's the Leah puzzle. It's not anyone else's puzzle. It's like we're focused on you. So, anyways, if you're struggling with doctors, find a second opinion. Don't be afraid to get different help. And your body is not the problem. So just remember that when you're going to see the doctors. Another question for you is how can we know if we are fat phobic?
My short and quick answer is we all are. We all fall on that spectrum, whether we would like to admit it or not. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. And I can understand because we all want to be, I don't know if all of us, but I would say the high majority of people want to be inclusive and loving and open-minded. And part of that is recognizing your own internal or your own automatic biases. Like, we didn't choose the world or the society that we were born into. We don't get to decide the messaging that is surrounding us every single day. So it's impossible to live in this world and not have those kinds of biases. Again, the spectrum that I mentioned earlier, you can fall on any point of that. And the goal is to work toward getting to the part of the spectrum where you experience the least amount. I don't think there's any human on this earth, or there ever will be. I mean, I don't know how long the world will continue after we're gone, but I truly don't believe at the rate we're at now that there will ever be a part on that spectrum where you just have zero. So there will always be anti-fat bias at some level. Let me give some examples. If you are walking down the street and you're observing other people and you have a certain way of thinking about a stranger based on the size of their body, that is an indicator that you experience anti-fat bias. If you are looking at the mirror of your own body and you have a certain feeling of discomfort or dislike based off of a part of your body that you wish was smaller, that is a form of anti-fat bias or fat phobia. There are thousands, probably an infinite number of examples, but I try not to give them because I don't want them to be triggering to people listening. So it's truly, if the more research you do on identifying what anti-fat bias is or fat phobia, the better able you are to recognize what that looks like for yourself. And then you can start unpacking. I do have a webinar where I go into detail. I forget how long it is. It's like an hour and 15 minutes or something, all on identifying and unpacking your own anti-fat bias. So if you're interested, I would love people to learn more through there, but there are so many ways you can figure that out. And I think simply learning more about it helps you to recognize it within yourself.
That's amazing. I will definitely link that in the show notes for them, because I want to watch it too. That sounds really good. Um, and kind of like tagging off of that question, for those who can recognize that, I mean, maybe like you said, they might still be a little bit fat phobic, but for those who have improved, but they just feel like this immense guilt and sadness for their past and the things they thought and maybe even said in the past about other people's bodies. Do you have any recommendations for them on how to, I guess, move forward and also maybe like forgive themselves in a sense?
Well, I was just going to say forgiveness. Just like I don't blame the generations before us. I don't want you to blame yourself because you know what you know with the knowledge you're given. And so if you have been given this understanding that fat is bad, which again, we know is not true, but if that's all you're told, that's all you know. And so if you've acted out or you've thought things because of that information, because of that belief system, it's not your fault that that's what you were given. If you know better and you learn more and you do something about it and you change the way you behave, that in and of itself is such a gift and a form of forgiveness that you can now move forward and treat people better than how you did in the past. We're all supposed to grow and change and evolve. And what a beautiful thing in and of itself for you to even just improve in that aspect. But we can't possibly know everything. I mean, there are still plenty of things I have to learn in this realm, even though it is what I focus all of my time into. And I'll constantly be learning and growing from it. And I wouldn't get anywhere if I stayed hung up on the mistakes I've made in the past based off of the information that I had at the time. So give yourself some grace. This is really friggin' hard. And we are all victims of it, and we are all participants of it. And the more work we do to be less impactful in a negative way, the better.
I really appreciate and like that response because I know for myself, when I think back on like 2018, Leah, when I had just lost a whole bunch of weight and I hadn't connected the fact that I was still unhealthy with my size, that I said and thought a lot of things that were 1000% fat phobic, that I'm just like, it hurts my heart now. But I try to think that it's like, since now I do know better, I'm doing better and I am like trying to share the complete opposite of what I used to share. But then I get like this feedback of like, but Leah, you told me this back then.
Mm.
It's like, I did. I'm sorry I did that. And this is what I've learned. Let's move forward together.
And what you just expressed is so common and something that I can relate to as well. What I've taught people who are newer into their journey of body image healing is that, you know, we hear the ideas so often that like people aren't thinking about your body as much as you are, or people don't care what you look like. But when we really step back, and I personally think about what things I cared about when I was so obsessed with shrinking myself, I did care because I made it my business. I made it my personality. Like it was so much, I was so obsessed with what everyone around me looked like because I was so insecure about what I looked like. And so the farther you go on this journey and the more healing you do, you recognize how you start not even noticing what other people look like. And you start recognizing that it really doesn't matter. So when we said those fat phobic things, when we had that fat phobic mindset, it was because we were so insecure with ourselves and we were taught to be. And the more secure, the more confident you do become, the less you give a crap about what you look like and what anyone else looks like, because you're allowed to just exist in the body you have now, and you're allowed to do that without any kind of apology.
You semi just answered a question that I was given from an Instagram friend,
Oh,
and they said that they struggle with feeling like they're going to be judged and feeling insecure about that because they are in a bigger body compared to their friends. And so I was kind of thinking, it's like, are they still feeling insecure and judging themselves about that because they still have those fat phobia tendencies and beliefs, which is keeping them insecure?
mm, yes. And would they be your friends? Like if you're saying that they're your friends and you happen to be in a larger body, they clearly, hopefully, I mean, obviously that's the only information that we have, but like they're still choosing to be your friend because of the things they love about you, the things you bring to the table, the humor that you have, your outlook on life, your passions, the way you love. That's what they love you for. That's what they want to be around you for. Hopefully, you aren't choosing and picking your friends based off of their body size or the way they look. But I always use that reframe because we often get stuck in this idea that we're going to be judged by family members, by loved ones, and maybe we will. We live in such a judgmental society that people are going to judge us no matter what. And when we're getting those conflicting messages, like I mentioned before, of even body type, if we're going to focus on that. So if we think of the Kardashians, and I hate bringing them up, but we're going to bring them up here. Their body type has fluctuated over the years. And one day we're taught this is the kind of body type we want. And we want to make this voluptuous, or we want to make this stick out, or we want to make this smoother, or whatever. And then now we're in this new era where their bodies are changing and transforming right before our eyes because they have the means to do so. And we're now being taught, oh, just kidding. Actually, this is what we want to go for. And we want this to be smaller, and we want this to be less voluptuous. And it's exhausting. So people are going to judge us no matter what, because the expectations of society are constantly changing. And so you can't possibly fit the ideal, maybe ever, but you can't fit it constantly because it's always changing. So people are going to judge us no matter what. And I always think that it's better to be judged for being who you are when you can relax and breathe and just exist versus when you are so uptight and so conscious and so aware and so hyper alert that you are trying to be someone you aren't for the approval of other people when you might never get that in the first place.
Yeah, it's giving people the opportunity to actually love you for who you are. I know for myself, like in high school, especially, I was always trying to mimic other people that I thought were so cool. And the one thing that I learned from one of my best friends from back then was just it's like, Leah, be yourself. I don't want you to be like everyone else. I want to be your friend, not their friend. And so it's just let people get to love you for who you are. Your body is not a trend. Like you can't keep up with the Kardashians. That's actually what their show is called, right? Keeping up with the Kardashians. You can't
Yes.
keep up with them. No one can. Your body isn't the problem. That's not the reason why you can't keep up with them. They're just, like you said, like they can pay to have their body changed by surgeons.
Right. Which is terrifying to think about, but
100%. So, something that I struggled with a lot because of fat phobia was a fear of weight gain. And something that helped me and that I now recommend in order to stop fearing weight gain includes making peace with an old version of your body, unlearning fat phobia, and getting rid of the scale. And I'm curious to know if there's anything you would add to that list.
I feel like this is probably just a broken record response, but it truly is unpacking your fat phobia, and understanding that it's okay to be fearful of that, but there are reasons we've been conditioned to be fearful. I love those three examples that you've already given. Um, I guess one more I would add is expanding what you're exposed to. So if you're scrolling through social media and it's constantly people in smaller bodies or like Fitspo influencers or people who, after you've obtained their content, you feel worse about your own self, if you feel worse about your body, whether that's their fault or not, those are the people that I would mute or stop following altogether. If you can then increase diverse bodies of all shapes and sizes, particularly ones that look very similar to your own body type. And people who experience body dysmorphia will have a hard time with that. So, what I tell people is just all body types, all shapes, all sizes, all colors. If you can diversify your feed, you will experience so much more acceptance of different kinds of bodies. Our society, the way that we are conditioned in this terrible messaging is that we only see one type, or we see a very, very narrow population of body types, that we forget other types exist. We forget normal bodies are actually in the world. And so if you can diversify what you're being exposed to, that can help make it easier to accept your own body and feel less fat phobic, like you're more fat accepting.
I think that's so good because I know that there are quite a few different accounts that I have followed that is like you see them just completely living their life because they're human, they're allowed to, they're worthy. And it is really inspiring. And it's like, if you can see the good in them, if you can see that their body isn't actually the problem that's holding them back, then your body isn't the problem either. It's just the way you're thinking about your body. Your body isn't the exception, though. But I think it's so true because we do get stuck in the, especially with diet culture and the fitness industry, it's like we're following the people who fit that ideal because
Mhm.
we're thinking we got to be that. It's like they make up a very small population, I think. And you should follow more people. And I mean, that's cool too, because you get to meet more people also.
Yes.
So, to close out, I have two questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what do you wish you could go back and tell younger Jess?
That you are worthy. I think for so long, whether it was directly said to me or not, I grew up to believe that I wasn't, and that I had to do all of these things to earn worthiness. I think in addition to diet culture and this idea that we need to be smaller, as women, we're also taught to be quieter, to be, easier to handle, to not be a burden. And so the mix of that, those two things, I was constantly just trying to blend in and be as easy and acceptable as I possibly could be. And I really truly lost who I was. And so I am still on that journey of accepting who I am, every aspect of who I am, and having to tell myself, because I wish I heard it when I was younger, that I am worthy, whether I fit society's expectations or not.
That's amazing. I love that because you are worthy. All ages of you has been worthy. You are just worthy as you are. So I think she hears it loud and clear. I love that.
Thank you.
The second question is, what advice would you give to someone just starting out trying to love their body?
Have reasonable expectations. So I think the message gets lost in the excitement of the body positivity movement that there are still bumps, there are still bruises. People everywhere on that spectrum of healing still experiences tough body image days, and the goal is never to have none. So you are still human, you are still on this same earth, you are still inundated with the same harmful messaging. And so there is no way that you can live your life without having some kind of difficulty in accepting what you look like. So have reasonable expectations that you won't get to that point. You'll still have tough body image days. You'll just have more tools on how to handle them, and they won't spiral into affecting days and days on end. They'll be quicker to handle, easier to manage.
I think that's so important to know when you're just starting to learn to love your body because especially with like our all in, all out kind of mindset, it's
Yeah.
like I have to have all good body image days or else. It's like, or else what? Or else you're human?
Or I have one bad body image day. Oh no, like all my progress is gone, or I must be doing something wrong. Like, no, what you're actually doing is being human.
And being human is good and that's all that you need to do and you are worthy as a human.
Exactly.
Period.
Period. End of story.
So, thank you so much for your time and for this amazing conversation and just helping us be more compassionate humans to humans of all sizes. Because, like we were just saying, that's it. We are all human, we are all worthy, we are all lovable. And so, just thank you so much for sharing your time with us, your knowledge, and keep on doing what you're doing, please, because we need more of you. And I absolutely love it. And just thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.